actually somebody who has some experience with living and not just in Canada but also in Yemen. Most of you know him because he's been very active in the Dialogue with Diversity and in the radio show, and he also happens to be an extremely esteemed poet and an author. And his first novel, which is entitled The Final Flight from Sana'a, is the story of how he left the dictatorship and the situation in his home country and how he sees the opportunity for the future. So Dr. Ghanem is a recently retired neurologist, and he's was associate professor of medicine at the University of Ottawa. And he's also an ardent spokesperson and a fighter for democracy, social justice, and dignity for all women and men. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Ghanem.
With your permission, I'm going to speak from here. Well, I'm quite happy to talk to you about Yemen, partly because I think very few people know about Yemen, or at least relatively less than, say, Egypt or Libya. So Yemen is a small country in the corner of Arabia, south of Saudi Arabia. Everyone knows about Saudi Arabia, but knows about Yemen until recently. It's a very poor country. We have about 24 million people in both North and South Yemen, which has now become one country. The GDP is very low. Per capita GDP is only $1,000, and that's very close to Somalia. Do you know what the GDP is in Canada? 35,000. Okay, the per capita GDP. The level of literacy is very low. It's about 50% compared to 99% in Europe, and even compared to other Arab countries, it's very, very low. Women have a literacy rate of only 30% compared to 70% for men. So the average is about 50%. So we start off with a kind of a basket case, if you like, in a way. How did Yemen come to being? I think I'll go over the history because it's maybe something that you don't read about. The Yemen was part of the Ottoman Empire a long time ago, 500 years ago. Then the Turks were thrown out of there, and then they came back. And then again, during the First World War, they were ejected out of Yemen. And a king called Imam Yahya became the king of Yemen. We're talking about North Yemen now. And he ruled Yemen for 33 years, or 30 years, just like Ali Abdullah Saleh now, who's been there for about 33 years. And when he was assassinated, his son Ahmad took over, and he was a king for about 14 years, and then he died. And his son Al-Badr was supposed to take over, but the Republicans, people who wanted to get rid of the monarchy, challenged that, and there was a civil war in Yemen, in which other nations took part. So, as you can imagine, on the side of the Republicans, there was the Egyptian army. The Egyptians were, at that time, ruled by Colonel Nasser, a very famous Arab leader. So, thanks to the Egyptians, and there are quite a few here, the Republic was born in a way. But on the other side, fighting on the side of Al-Badr were the Saudis, who wanted, of course, to have the monarchy and the status quo in order to preserve their own system. So that's how kind of Yemen came to be. But on top of all that, Yemen is a very primitive and tribal country in a way, which does not apply, say, to Egypt, for example. It applies apparently to Libya, but not to Egypt. And so the tribes have a lot of influence on this. And the person who belongs to the biggest and most powerful and most armed tribe is likely to survive and thrive. And this is what is actually one of the factors that is leading to the problem currently, because you hear about the Al-Ahmar, General Mohsen Al-Ahmar, this Hamid Al-Ahmar. These are all leaders in Yemen who belong to Al-Ahmar family, which comes from one of the major tribes, and they're all are armed to the teeth. But fortunately, in this case, these people are actually siding with the young people who are in the Change Square. The name was changed from Tahrir to Tahrir, and so they are one party to the conflict, and the students are in the middle. They are unarmed. They are just asking for all the things that we Canadians take for granted: freedom, democracy, dignity, jobs, simple things. They're not asking for the moon, as people say. And so the government, on the other hand, of President Ali Abdullah Saleh, which has been there for 33 years, is protected by the Republican Guard and the Secret Service and Mukhawarat and so on. And the problem which Egypt does not have, since we were talking about Egypt, is that the people who are commanding the Republican Guard and the Secret Service are actually the sons and nephews of the present president, which makes it extremely difficult to get rid of them, because they will always be siding with the president anyway, not only because it's the father, but because Ahmad Saleh, the son of Ali Abdullah Saleh, stands to gain the throne of Yemen for another 33 years, he thinks. And so, of course, he's going to be on that side. So we have three parties now in this conflict. Now, I'm just going to turn to Aden for a moment. How many? No? I'll tell you a little bit about South Yemen, because I was born in Aden, in South Yemen. The history of South Yemen is different and less complicated. South Yemen was a little, Aden was a small fishing village. And it came to notice when a ship sent by the United Kingdom or England in those days to go to India for trade, spice trade and so on. And so this boat came around the Cape of Good Hope and sailed up the eastern coast of Africa, and somehow got misdirected. Instead of going east towards India, landed on the shores of Aden. And that was in 1839, more than 100 years before I was born. And so Captain Haynes decided that he would make Aden into a British colony. So Aden became a British colony. And as a result of that, it was actually a great thing, in my opinion, in retrospect. People say, oh, you have to get rid of the colonialists and so on. Yes, the Adenese, or the Yemenis of the south, did get rid of the British in 1967. But in the meantime, what happened is that law and order was established, civil service was established, education was established. So, transportation, roads, and so on. And as a result of this educational improvement, I, for example, was able to qualify through my school to go to the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done so. And so Aden was really higher education, higher standard of living, but it has been kind of swallowed by the bigger entity of North Yemen in this one entity called Yemen Now, which came together in 1990. Now, there's lots of things, of course, that we can talk about, but I think to give you an overview of what's happened is important, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions that I might have. There are some people in the audience who are much more knowledgeable about this than I, and we will also seek their help if I am stuck. Thank you.